welcome to another episode of From the Wheelhouse. We're so glad that you're joining with us this evening. This is a cold, cold evening here in Chicago. We got our first real snow. It's not really that bad, at least. The lake hasn't frozen up, so we can still go sailing. My name is Captain Mark Stevenson. I'm in my 49th year in the business. No, I haven't been a captain all of those years, only about 20 of them. And I want to tell you I am so happy to be able to present to you what it's like to be a captain from the wheelhouse of so many, many different vessels, and to give you all types of information about what's on the great Chicago waterways. We have 10 harbors in the Chicago system. We also have numerous restaurants, bars, and grills, and we're going to be talking about those too, because at some point we're going to, during this season, and this is the first of 12 shows, at some point this season, we're going to do tastings with Chicago's best restaurants, bars, and grills along the waterways. In fact, we are developing a series on that right now as we speak. But today is a very special day. I have a couple of guests. You see these guys sitting next to me. I want to introduce them to you, and we're going to dig right in. But first, I want to ask you, how many of you have heard about something called the Underground Railroad? The Underground Railroad, and what could that possibly have to do with From the Wheelhouse and boats and the waterways that run through Chicago? We're going to find out today, folks. Next to me, I have Tom Sheppard. Tom Sheppard is the director of the Little Calumet Underground Railroad Project. Seated next to him is Larry McClellan. If I pronounced it correct, please forgive.
Close enough.
Okay. He is the professor emeritus professor of Governor State University, and he has written several books about life on the Underground Railroad and about the Calumet River. These are educators, and so today's show is going to be pretty easy for me because I don't have to spend 30 minutes just pouring stuff into you. I have two guys to help me, and we're going to get right to it. But first, I want you to strap in. I want you to strap in and get ready because today is the day before the 2024 boat show. The Chicago Boat Show is opening tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, at McCormick Place. Make sure that you come down and see all the beautiful boats, but most of all the different new products to keep people safe and to do all the fun things on the waterways. The show is running from Wednesday until Sunday, and it's open to the public. Back to our guests. I know this guy here for the past 20, 25 years or more.
Yeah.
And he brought into my life Professor Larry, and I can tell you, I'm so grateful, so grateful after having gone through your book and seen the things that you have written about. First of all, Tom, tell us about this Underground Railroad. What actually is a Underground Railroad, and why is it? Don't start laughing. I know I saw some of you said, "What do these white guys know about the Underground Railroad?" Okay, you're going to find out in a minute.
Well, I speak to the local aspect of the Underground Railroad. Most people understand it and know about the Underground Railroad from prior to the Civil War when people were escaping from slavery down south, and much of the activity, the Underground Railroad activity, which Professor McClellan is going to tell you it's neither underground nor is it a railroad.
Right.
But we'll get to the reasoning behind that in a minute. But the fact is that many people escaping slavery in the South came up through our area here in Chicago. And so few people know the facts about that, and that's what our assignment is, to teach people and to educate them about the fact that so many people came seeking their freedom up through the Chicagoland area and found people here willing to help them along on their journey and to risk their risk being arrested for assisting the freedom seekers. And so there's so many remarkable stories about it, and that's what we do, is tell the stories.
So what is your why? Why are you spending so much time, both of you, spend so much of your life investigating, researching, and then spreading more and more information, giving tours and developing opportunities for people on the river to be able to spread the word? What's your why? Why are you really doing this?
Well, speaking for myself, it became a passion of mine because where I live is only a couple miles away from a significant spot on the Underground Railroad called the Ton Farm, and we'll be talking about that. I mean, we could be talking about baseball and Henry Aaron and Babe Ruth and all those guys too, but it happens to be that Professor McClellan and I both have studied and researched and now like telling the stories about the Underground Railroad in our area.
Very good. Professor, what is your why? Tell the folks.
There are really two great cycles of stories of the Underground Railroad. We're talking about the period of several decades before the Civil War, the 1830s, 40s, and 50s. And there are two great cycles of stories in the Underground Railroad. The stories of the people that moved out of their enslavement, out of the South, they seized their own freedom, and then the stories of the people that responded to them. And what we're trying to do is tell both sets of stories. And the passion for me is that historically we've told a lot of stories about the people that helped. The networks, the Underground Railroad. We haven't told enough stories about the people that were escaping from their enslavement. And I think that this is the first great civil rights movement in American history. And that's why we need to be talking about it. Because we've got stories about people gaining their freedom, seizing their freedom, and then the people that respond to them. And here in the Chicago region, the waterways were critical because people coming out of their enslavement were coming up the Mississippi River Valley, then the Illinois River Valley, and they were coming to Chicago because that gave them access to the whole Great Lakes region, and it gave them access to travel by boat from Chicago to Detroit, and then freedom in Canada, or to travel overland from Chicago to Detroit, going around the bottom of Lake Michigan. Well, and in all of those stories, the waterways have just been a central part of those stories.
Professor, and you want to talk into the camera because we have a really, really smart audience, and they're looking at they need to look into your eyes and really learn from you, Professor, and Tom. So address the camera, but I want you to ask yourselves this question. Why do you think that even today, so many people don't even know that we have a river system? They know nothing about the Calumet River, nothing about the Chicago River. In fact, when we had the William Tillman Maritime Academy up and running on the Calumet River, it's located right behind Oddgale Gardens.
Right.
Which is just about 100% African American. Now, I was so surprised that most of our students that came to the water never knew that they had a river at the back door. How did that happen, Professor?
Well, I think fundamentally what happened in American history is that initially, for hundreds of years, the waterways were the great transportation systems. They got replaced by an initial road system, then a railroad system, and the railroads blocked everything out. And then following the railroads, the development of highways and interstates, and we have literally forgotten that the first great framework was the framework created by the rivers and the lakes, and that's how people moved around. And that certainly was key to the movement of freedom seekers as they came into Chicago. And what we're discovering is we're rediscovering the power of the Little Calumet River. Because in the middle of the 19th century, a group of Dutch settlers settled in what we know as Roseland and South Holland.
Yes.
And that was 15 miles south of Chicago. Chicago was about the size of the Loop. And so freedom seekers that made it to Chicago then had to travel south from Chicago through these Dutch communities, and they crossed the Little Calumet River. And among those Dutch settlers was a family called Jan and Angie Tunn. And we have been really working on the history of the Tunn farm, and we have done the history of it. It has been designated by the National Park Service.
Where is the Tunn farm?
It's right on the north side of the Little Calumet River, and for those of you that know Chicago well, it is directly south of Altgeld Gardens, so it is just west of Beaubien Woods, and it is just east of the Indiana Avenue Bridge, which is very, very significant. But we've been working on this Tunn farm, and Tom can tell you a little bit about some of the stuff that we've been doing with the Tunn farm.
In translation, for some of you that may not know your geography, it's south of the Crazy Hundreds.
Right.
So, and so, Larry, you tell us about the opportunity to open up the Tunn farm to the public.
Yeah, that's one of the goals of our organization, the Little Calumet River Underground Railroad Project, was to bring visitors out, to educate people. It's so satisfying when we have groups of people coming out, and especially like folks might live right there in Altgeld Gardens, and before they leave our tour,
Yes.
they are just blown away and amazed, telling us that they lived right here their entire lives and didn't know any of this history. So we're bringing that to the people. We're hoping to reach more young people so they know more about the where they live and the history in the area where they are. So in street names, it would be roughly 134th and Ellis Avenue. I want to add that, or St. Lawrence Avenue is where the old farmhouse was at one time, at 134th Street along the Little Calumet River.
Now we were together this past fall, and we were together with our producer Bill Hoover and former state representative Paul Williams, our host for that day, and we went on the Calumet River by boat. And talk about that trip. That was just an amazing day to see this, because I was transported back in time, and I thought to myself, what would I do? What would I do if I was a freedom seeker? And how could I trust anyone? The Tunn farm was owned by a white family. The Tunn family was white. How would I know if they were abolitionists or not?
Well, actually, what happened was that as freedom seekers made their way out of the South into northern Illinois, they discovered that northern Illinois was pretty safe. They had to be careful, because the laws against helping freedom seekers were just awful laws. But they could be relatively safe, and they knew that there was a network of people who were responding. In the city of Chicago, there was a group of young black families that were responding to freedom seekers and helping them, a group of young white families, and those whites and blacks were working together to help the freedom seekers. So as they left Chicago, they were headed to Detroit and freedom in Canada. The great irony was, to be free, you had to get out of the land of the free. So they had to make it to Canada. In Chicago, they would have known, when you go south, if you need any help in your first day out, talk to the Dutch. And the Dutch people would have referred them to this. So the African-American leadership for the Underground Railroad in Chicago knew about these Dutch families.
Well,
could help them along the way.
They also knew about the police that was formed.
Absolutely.
Formed at first as a group of slave catchers that would go and hunt for slaves in the northern states.
Yeah.
How would they possibly know how to be guided to a safety areas? And many of them had their whole families with them.
Well, that's right. And again, it was as they were welcomed to the city of Chicago, there was a very clear network of connections so that people knew where the safe houses were. And as they left Chicago and were heading for Detroit, the first place they would be going through would be these Dutch communities, what we know as Roseland and South Holland. They were traveling on the historic road from Chicago to Detroit, and the people in Chicago would have told them about where they could find safety. We have, as a matter of fact, a great story about one of the Dutch people hiding some fugitives in his barn, and then the slave catchers arrived, and he took them all over the place, sent them back to Chicago, and he invited the fugitive seekers out of his barn to come in and have dinner with him.
I read that part in one of your books. That was very good.
Yeah, well, there's a remarkable set of stories about people seeking their freedom and then finding folks that could respond. And we need to be telling both of those sets of stories. In terms of the rivers and the stories, one of the most powerful stories I know is the story of John and Eliza Little. They were enslaved on adjoining farms in western Tennessee. They fell in love, got married, and realized if they were going to have any kind of life, they had to escape. They had to seize their own freedom. And so they headed for the Tennessee River, this western Tennessee. And as you all may know, and you may know, the Tennessee River flows north. It's one of the few American rivers that flows north through Tennessee and Kentucky. They followed the Tennessee River up north, heading for the Ohio and heading for Illinois. And they got close to the Ohio River, and there was a huge swamp. And John Little remembered years later, he said, I put Eliza on a log, and we had a couple belongings, and I put them behind her on the log. And I pushed that log through that swamp. And I knew that at any moment, if I misstepped, I would lose everything that I loved.
Absolutely.
But he didn't. He got through the swamp. They got to the Ohio River, borrowed a boat, and got across the Ohio River, got into Illinois, met some other freedom seekers who didn't know what to do. And Eliza Little said, I know where I have come from. I know where we must go. And if needs be, I will walk barefoot to Chicago for my freedom. And John and Eliza Little walked 370 miles. They got to the Illinois River, followed the Illinois River all the way up to Chicago. They walked 370 miles to get to Chicago so that they could continue on their freedom journey. And we got loads of stories like that, many of them that connect to the waterways and to the land and to the historic roads that connect these communities.
I do recall when I was in Detroit to receive an award, the Ludington Award for bringing people into the maritime industry. And it was at the Mariners Church in Detroit. And the minister, after the award ceremony, carried me down to the basement, showed me a tunnel. The tunnel was bricked off, and he told me the significance of that tunnel, which shook me in my boots, which was that tunnel was the last stop on the Underground Railroad because the freedom seekers would go down this tunnel and get on boats to cross the river to Canada. You cross the Detroit River, you're in Canada. But they were filled with all types of provisions to survive. Today, their ancestors are throughout Canada. Right. And I was so surprised on my visits to Canada to see so many black communities. I was just so surprised. Yeah. Folks, if you've just joined us, my name is Captain Mark Stevenson. I am so glad to have for my guest today, Tom Sheppard, and he's the director of the Little Calumet Underground Railroad Project. Also seated next to him is Emeritus Professor of Governor State University, Larry McClellan. Am I pronouncing that right?
You got it right.
Okay, McClellan. Right. Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. We only have a few minutes left. And we want to talk about the development of the Calumet River, and you guys have something to do with tourism on the river.
Yeah.
Really?
Across America.
Wait a minute. Folks, there's no sidewalks there right now. There's no riverwalk. There's no roads. Go ahead. How are you going to get us a tour?
In fact, the Ton Farm sits on the only unpaved street in Chicago, 134th place. But heritage tourism, looking at our history, is one of the largest areas of tourism advancement these days, and there is across Illinois a lot of work that's being done in terms of African American heritage tourism, and we're very much a part of that. So tell them about the tours.
But wait a minute.
Yeah.
You folks, get your pen and paper ready. We're going to give you some vital information at the end of the show. All of our organizations are not-for-profit, and so if you want to find out more, and I know we can't present but so much during a short 27-minute show, I want to make sure that you are able to contact us again. My email address is very easy. Spell it all out. YourCaptainMark@gmail.com. YourCaptainMark@gmail.com. How would we get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, the first thing I want to mention is our pretty new website that we put up a couple of weeks ago.
What's the website?
The website is called undergroundrailroadproject.org. Undergroundrailroadproject.org. And you can find information. We have tours that we do, presentations. We're going to have a very busy month in February, that being Black History Month. We've got several appearances and tabling that we're going to be doing on Martin Luther King Day in a week and a half on the 15th. And we do presentations throughout the year, and we do tours throughout the year. We are contracted with the Cook County Forest Preserves to do 4 tours each year, and we brought hundreds and hundreds of people out to this territory. Captain Mark is asking about, how do we relate to tourism? We bring people out to a place that they've never been to, and the word spreads, because the next time we do a tour, we have people that were referred by the folks on the last tour. So it's an interesting topic, and there are always people that are interested in coming on our tours or booking us for a presentation.
Is there a phone number that we can give?
You can have my phone number, Mark. Anybody can call me at any time.
He's accessible. He's accessible. What's your number?
773-370-3305.
Say it again.
Oh, again, it's 773-370-3305.
Any final points, Professor?
One of the things that we're discovering is that the opportunities in tourism, and heritage tourism particularly, are really enormous. And that we would certainly be, if there's some folks out there, high school students or college students, or people that are looking to learn how to be a tour guide, we'd be delighted to talk to them, and we're always looking for people. We're working with other universities, and we're developing tours related to Black history across Chicago and the Chicago Southland, in addition to the Underground Railroad. And I think that it's an area that people should start looking at.
Very
in
good.
terms of careers.
Ladies and gentlemen, the show, it just went by so fast. Oh, my goodness. Thank both of you so much for coming. Before you go, though, I want the public to know this. Abolitionists were the people, the white people for the most part, who helped to end slavery and helped to change many of the laws. We would not be free as African Americans today if there were not abolitionists. And these two men sitting next to me, I believe if they lived a couple of hundred years ago, they would be fighting for that exact cause. And I want to tell you one final thing before we go. If I don't teach you anything, I'm going to teach you this, that we are no longer the cargo. That is absolutely right. We're today's engineers, captains, fiberglass repairmen, 300 different job categories. If you want to find out more, email me at yourcaptainmark@gmail.com. I'll hook you up with these guys if you missed any information. Thank you so much. Peace and love to you. until we see you next week, we'll see you then. Mama, get the coffee ready, because the kid, he's on his way.
Terrific.
Thank you, Mark.